Welcome to The Explainer. As an aviation historian, I spend a lot of time looking back at the terrifying reality of flying over the open ocean in the 1940s. I want you to go ahead and forget literally everything you know about modern flight. We're stepping back into an era where crossing the sea was a true test of raw human nerve paired with some seriously primitive machinery.
So how do you navigate a featureless ocean without GPS? Let's dive right into this by stripping away all the modern technology that we just completely take for granted today. Imagine sitting in a freezing, noisy cockpit over the Atlantic Ocean. You don't have satellite GPS, there's no real-time weather radar pinging on a screen. It is just you, a primitive analog compass, a temperamental radio, the absolute deafening roar of the engine, and endless miles of dark blue water down below. Establishing just how incredibly dangerous this was is absolutely key to understanding the infamous Bermuda Triangle.
Part 1. The Tragedy of Flight 19, December 5, 1945. Our primary case study begins with an event that, launched 1,000 conspiracy theories. But the reality is far more grounded in the brutal facts of early aviation. 5 U.S. Navy torpedo bombers, known as Flight 19, departed Fort Lauderdale, Florida. They were led by Lieutenant Charles Taylor, a highly experienced pilot who had over 2,500 flight hours under his belt. This really should have been a completely routine training mission over a reef called Henson Chicken.
But looking at the timeline of that afternoon builds a truly harrowing picture. They take off at 2 p.m., pretty standard. But by 3:45 p.m., Taylor radios in and he sounds deeply confused. He can't see land. He believes they veered way off course. By 4 p.m., there's just total confusion up in the air, and command's actually transferred to another pilot. And what's even more terrifying is that when 2 rescue planes were immediately sent out to find them, they too lost radio contact. In just a 30-minute window, 6 different aircraft completely vanished.
Just listen to these chilling final words from the radio transcripts. "We cannot find West. Everything is wrong. It looks like we are entering white water." I mean, imagine the absolute terror of being lost at sea in 1945. You're running out of fuel, your analog instruments are failing you, the sky is getting dark, and the radio is giving you absolutely nothing but static. This was the stark, horrifying realization of being totally and completely cut off from the rest of the world.
250,000. The military responded by searching a staggering 250,000 square miles of the Atlantic Ocean and Gulf waters. It was an unprecedented effort for the time, but in an era without real-time tracking or modern transponders, silence meant complete erasure. The ocean just swallowed them whole, and tragically, not a single one of the 27 men, 14 from Flight 19 and 13 from the rescue planes, were ever found.
Part 2. When Compasses Lie. The Magnetic Autopsy. The crucial point here is figuring out the why. Why did a veteran pilot with 2,500 hours of flight time get hopelessly lost on a perfectly clear day? This brings us to the severe technical failures that paralyzed experienced pilots like Lieutenant Taylor. Because back in the 1940s, if you couldn't trust your compass, you were practically flying blind.
What is truly fascinating about this specific region is the geological reality beneath the waves. The island of Bermuda isn't just a tropical paradise, it's actually formed from the remains of an ancient underwater volcano. When that magma cooled into basalt over millions of years, it left behind an estimated 500 billion tons of magnetite. And magnetite just so happens to be the most magnetic, naturally occurring substance on Earth.
And that vast, almost incomprehensible amount of magnetite throws analog compasses into total chaos. In this specific pocket of the Atlantic, the magnetic interference can pull a compass needle off by up to 10 degrees. So instead of pointing to magnetic north, it points pilots toward the true geographic North Pole, which are roughly 1,200 miles apart. If you are relying solely on that tiny needle to get you back to Florida, that invisible magnetic pole causes a catastrophic 1,200-mile navigational error. Lieutenant Taylor thought he was flying over the Florida Keys, but his compass was straight up lying to him.
Part 3. The Fragility of Analog Aviation. Beyond Flight 19. Now, to truly understand this era, we have to broaden our scope a bit. It wasn't just military bombers falling victim to these skies. If we look at other flights from the 1940s, we can see how incredibly fragile early passenger aviation was too. I mean, commercial airliners were absolute marvels of their day, but by modern safety standards, they were hanging by a thread.
Look at this tragic cascade of simple human and mechanical errors from a 1948 DC3 flight leaving Puerto Rico for Miami. On the ground, engineers notice a weak battery. But instead of waiting hours to properly charge it, the captain makes a rushed decision to take off and let the plane's generator charge it in the air. Seems harmless enough, right? But mid-flight, the radio transmitter, which is relying on that weakened power system, completely fails. They couldn't communicate their position to anyone. Because of one single weak battery and a hasty decision, 31 people disappeared into the pitch-black ocean.
Similarly, take a look at the Star Tiger passenger plane disappearance, which was also in 1948. Captain Brian McMillan was a highly experienced World War II pilot. Facing some incredibly strong winds, he deliberately flew his plane low, at just 2,000 feet to avoid the turbulence. However, his radio reports explicitly stated he was cruising at 20,000 feet. It's highly likely that during a routine descent, he simply forgot his true altitude. A momentary lapse in concentration, a fatal human error in an unforgiving analog age, and the plane flies directly into the sea. Part 4. Environmental Amplifiers. Nature against machines. Combine those primitive technical vulnerabilities, the failing compasses, the weak batteries, the complete lack of modern altitude warnings, with the unforgiving environment of the Atlantic, and you create an absolute perfect storm for tragedy. Nature in this region is uniquely hostile to early machines. Take, for instance, this fascinating geological phenomenon, the methane blowout. Trapped deep below the ocean floor are these massive methane hydrates. When tectonic plates shift, massive plumes of highly flammable methane gas can shoot all the way up to the surface. This creates a patch of foamy water that instantly strips a ship of its buoyancy, causing it to sink like a stone. And think about it. If a plane, like the Star Tiger, was flying dangerously low at just 2,000 feet, that erupting, highly flammable gas could theoretically get sucked right into the engines, igniting them instantly.
But as historians, we usually point to a much more common and, frankly, much more terrifying environmental killer: relentless hurricanes. These massive storms form off the coast of Africa, gather immense strength over thousands of miles of warm ocean water, and then peak in severity right as they enter the Bermuda Triangle region. The relatively weak engines and primitive navigation tools of a 1940s aircraft were simply no match for the sheer, violent, overpowering force of a mid-Atlantic hurricane.
Part 5. The GPS Revolution. A sobering reality. As we wrap up our investigation today, we really have to look at how modern technology completely reframes these historical mysteries. Once you look at the hard evidence, the myths of sea monsters and alien abductions quickly fade away, replaced by a profound respect for the sheer mechanical reality of the time.
It becomes incredibly clear that the Bermuda Triangle was never a paranormal anomaly. It was a treacherous proving ground that highlighted the profound limitations of early analog flight. In the 1940s, pilots relied on highly vulnerable compasses and literal dead reckoning. Today, we have redundant power systems, real-time satellite tracking, and of course, GPS. We've essentially paved over the incredible dangers of the Bermuda Triangle with a thick layer of data and satellites. So I want to leave you with this provocative thought. If our modern GPS network suddenly failed tomorrow, and we were forced to navigate by analog compasses over that 500 billion tons of magnetic rock, how safe would our skies be today? The mystery of the Bermuda Triangle isn't about the supernatural. It's a sobering reminder of human vulnerability. And as a historian, I hope it leaves you with a deep, newfound respect for the daring pilots who navigated the dark skies long before the digital age. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and as always, keep your eyes on the skies.